This is problem number 1 from assessment number 6. It says, find the total area of the shaded region shown to the right given by the curve y equals 6 times sine x root 1 plus cosine x. So they want you to find the area under this curve essentially, because the curve is going from the x-axis down to this curve y equals 6 sine x, so on and so forth. So we want to find this area that's just underneath the x-axis that comes all the way up to this function here. So how do we find basically the area under the curve? Well, we need to integrate, and we want to integrate from the farthest left x value to the farthest right x value. So we're going to integrate from negative pi all the way to 0. But when we integrate this, because this is the area that's underneath the x-axis, it's going to give us a negative area, and remember our area can't actually be negative, so we actually want to integrate this and take the absolute value of it at the same time. So let's go ahead and write this out. We're going to do the integral from negative pi to 0. And typically we would say this function minus this function, but really because we're dealing with the just the x-axis, we can just say that this would be well, we can say 0 minus this function, and we can say that it would be negative 6 sine x root 1 plus cosine x, if you do 0 minus the function. Now you don't really need to do that because we're going to end up taking the absolute value of this anyways. So it's kind of a moot point there. You'll notice that we have a function inside of a function here, and we also have this function sitting outside. This is basically telling us that we're going to need to do some sort of substitution. In order to substitute, I want to kind of look at, do I want to make my u value sine x, or do I want to make my u value 1 plus cosine x? Well, if I make u sine x and I take the derivative of sine, I get cosine, but that's not going to cancel this cosine because of the root. So I want to actually make u be 1 plus cosine x so that I can actually integrate this, this root. So u equals 1 plus cosine x, du over dx equals derivative of 1 is 0, derivative of cosine is negative sine x. Multiply the sine x, or not multiply, multiply the dx across, we get du equals a negative sine x dx. Then divide the negative sine x over, we get du over negative sine x dx equals dx. We can plug all this in, so let's say that this is equal to the absolute value of the integral from negative pi to 0. We have negative 6 sine x root u, plug in du, so this is times du over negative sine x. Remember, we're taking the absolute value of that. That's going to equal, the sine x's cancel, right, because we have a denominator and sine x in the numerator. They cancel, and the negatives also cancel, so we're left just with 6. So we have absolute value of the integral from negative pi to 0, and we'll end up with, let's see, 6 root u du. Now we haven't taken the integral at all of this yet. We've just done a little bit of algebra for our substitution. So now we're actually going to integrate. When we do that, it's the absolute value of, we're going to have, this is u to the half, so when we add 1, it's u to the 3 halves divided by 3 halves. So we end up with u, we'll call it 6, this will be u to the 3 halves divided by 3 halves. And we're going to integrate this from negative pi to 0. Take the absolute value of it. 3 halves, when I divide it, I flip and multiply the top, so it'll be 2/3 times 6. 2/3 of 6 is 4. So I end up with 4. And this would be, I can replace the u with 1 plus cosine. So I can say 1 plus cosine x to the 3 halves. And we're evaluating that from negative pi to 0. And remember, we're taking the absolute value of that whole thing. That's going to equal, when I plug in the 0, I get absolute value of 4, 1 plus cosine times 0, or cosine of 0, and that would be to the 3 halves power, minus 4, 1 plus cosine negative pi, absolute value, or to the 3 halves, absolute value. That's going to give, well, 1 plus cosine 0. What's cosine of 0? Cosine of 0 is 1, so I end up with 1 plus 1 in here, so I have absolute value of 4, and then I have 2 to the 3 halves now, minus 4, 1 plus cosine negative pi. Well, cosine negative pi would be at 180 degrees. We know that cosine negative pi is negative 1. 1 plus negative 1 is 0. So you have minus 4 times 0 to the 3 halves power. Well, that cancels out. So we're just left with the absolute value of 4, 2 to the 3 halves power. So then we can say that that is, you could probably leave that answer how it is. However, they are probably going to take this 4 and make that into 2 squared times 2 to the 3 halves. Try and be a little fancy there. And 2 squared times 2 to the 3 halves, they have the same base, so they were going to say that that is going to be, after you take the absolute value, 2 to the 7 halves. Because this could be 4 over 2, add that there, you get 7 halves. So 2 to the 7 halves, whatever number you get there, that's the area between this x-axis and this function 6 sine x root 1 plus cosine x.